All right, here we go. We got another episode. I'm so excited about today's guest. We have Ryan Englin here. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you.
Thank you for being our guest. And today's conversation is going to be an awesome one about past performance is not an indicator of your future success. And I love when we were kind of talking before we started recording, we probably have 5 different titles for this. And I'm like, no, that's the one. That's the one. Because so often, and I'll have you introduce yourself and speak into this topic here, but so often people will call me and you'll appreciate this around hiring. They bring all their war chest of all their stories and why things didn't work out. And,
Yeah.
their frame of reference are always picking from their past. And
Mm.
they're like so absolute in it. So I'm excited for you to lead us in this conversation today. But before we do that, go ahead and introduce yourself or tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I'm the CEO and founder of Core Matters, and we work with blue collar companies to help them hire better people faster. We've developed a system we call the Core Fit hiring system, and we help them implement the tools and processes so that they can turn recruiting into one of the most effective departments in their company.
Wow. How's that for a power statement? And as we were talking before we started recording, blue collar, oh my goodness, in the trades, like that's a tough nut to crack right there, huh?
It is 40% of people in the trades are going to age out in the next 6 years.
6 years?
We're that close. So there's so much tribal knowledge. There's all these guys that have been doing it for 30, 40 years. They're just not going to be able to keep doing it. It's backbreaking work for a lot of them. So there's going to be a real push over the next decade to get the schools ramped up, get the younger generation, because it's tough work.
Yeah.
You can only crawl through attics and climb on roofs and do that kind of stuff for so long.
Well, that and also, the new generation, the parents that were beating into, I don't know, I'm a Gen Xer, beating into our heads of don't do that, go to college and work in computers and what have you. So we're in a really tough predicament here. So your work is cut out for you, huh?
Yeah, no, it's an industry-wide problem. And, that's part of our cause is to help solve that problem as much as we can.
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about today's topic about past performance and how people continually, entrepreneurs, business owners, leaders, pick from their past.
Yeah. So I will tell you, when it comes to recruiting and you're talking to someone new, one of the first things most people do is they look at an application, right? They look at a resume. And I have this belief about resumes that there are 2 types of resumes out there. There's those written by someone who doesn't know how to write a resume because they don't teach us in school. And there's those written by professional resume writers. And you can't trust either one of them.
Right.
So if we put a lot of emphasis into the quality of someone's resume or the data that's on the resume or the results that they achieved on the resume, it doesn't really help us make a good decision as to whether that's or not that someone's going to perform on our team.
I always say that. I've done a podcast on don't get seduced by the resume. And so often when I find really rock star candidates, the attorneys will say to me, can I see the resume? I'm like, nope, you're not seeing the resume. Get in the Zoom room, see the person's eye, hear how they handle themselves, because you're not hiring from, to your point, if they're phenomenal, the resume was amazing, they would be in the copywriting industry and making a ton of money, a lot more than you're probably going to pay them.
Well, and the best employees almost always aren't looking for work when you find them. They're gainfully employed, they're engaged, they're productive. And then a friend taps them on the shoulder and says, hey, you should go check this place out. Well, that's not someone who's got a polished resume. They don't need it. The top performers don't need a really good resume.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't agree more. So talk to us. How do we change, do the 2 millimeter shift, as Tony Robbins says, around this whole mindset and really get business owners, HR, hiring managers, how do we get their attention and really enroll them to shifting their mindset?
So I think the big thing to understand is why people end up being productive or engaged in a certain role. So we put a lot of emphasis on understanding your company's culture and the type of people that will thrive inside of your culture. So just because you might not have the best culture. You might not be perfect, right? We work with a lot of clients. The owner's a micromanager. That makes for a really rough culture. But there are a lot of people that thrive in that kind of micro environment. So there's no bad culture. It's just hiring the wrong people for your culture. And so one of the things I believe about past performance is you have no idea if you have a rock star candidate in front of you who was part of a toxic culture. Maybe the culture was toxic and that's why they didn't perform. Maybe they had a manager who was really beating down on them all the time, talking down to them, making them feel inferior when they could have performed if the manager would have just gotten out of the way. On the other side, you might see a top performer, someone who put up the best numbers, like #1 in my company, 12 months in a row. Well, if the metrics weren't very well defined, or if their scorecards were really easy to hit, that doesn't mean they're a great performer. You might have a culture or a company where you have to really work to perform. So you have no idea what was going on in that old environment if you're going to start looking for a top performer.
Yeah, or they have no metrics at all. So often you'll see all these, to your point, right? So you're a really good resume writer, you hire someone or what have you. And what stands out? Percentages, numbers, all that, what have you. But when you really dig deep into it, and of course, people get seduced by that. And they're like, this guy's a rock star. He's going to make me $1 billion overnight. And then you get in there and you find out they don't know how to use a CRM. There's no notes. They're a renegade, and they never had any tracking or measurements or KPIs or anything of that nature. And you find out that they were able to perform all this stuff with absolutely no data and tracking and their vanity metrics.
Yeah, absolutely. Too many vanity metrics right now out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I find, quite honestly, like you said, it's the people who are not looking for a job that make the right candidates, or that are fine. I find when I find either two-prong, I don't really even look at the resume too much. I'll have my sourcers just dial, talk to as many people and so often when I get the resume, I know better now after doing this for 26 plus years. And I talk to a person, I'm like, I have there's no way I can present you to this attorney or to this company based on your resume. And because there's so many rules out there. They're like, if I really put everything I do on my resume, it'd be 8 pages long. And I'm told it can only be 2 pages. So there's so many rules out there in regards to, or I've been so gainfully employed, I'm not looking, I haven't even used a resume in 15 years.
Well, and that's the thing when it comes to just the resume, the people that are really good, they're going to find a job. They're going to be employed. People are going to know, they're going to have a reputation. And when we look at the resume, if we put I find, to the point, your rules, like we put emphasis on things that don't matter. So we do a lot of work in the trades. So if I'm hiring a plumber, I'm not kidding you. I've had HR people say, we can't interview this guy. I said, why not? They go, there's typos on his resume. Like, he's a plumber. Do we really care if he ran spell check or not? Like, he's never going to do that as part of a job. Now, if you're hiring a copywriter or a grammar person, or that's different. But you're hiring a plumber, or you're hiring a machine operator. Well, he doesn't have periods at the end of his sentences. So what? Can he operate the equipment or not? And so to your point, with these rules, we put too many things, we put too much into the resume, and then we decide we don't want to talk to that person. They might be amazing.
Oh, always. Yeah.
For you, and it'll never come through in the resume,
ever. Yeah. I've had people in regards. So let's talk about schooling, saying they didn't go to a prestigious enough law school or schooling, or they don't have a degree or things of that nature, or it's job hopping. They don't stay anywhere longer than 2 years. To your point, when especially since 2008, you cannot use it as a measuring stick.
So I look at job hopping in 2 different ways when we're looking at the resume. So the first one is somebody that, And I'll just use an example we see a lot. Like they're a cashier for a few months, and then they go work a warehouse for a few months, and then they go work in a medical practice for a few months, and then they go work for a plumber for a few months. And it's job hopping. But I look at that person and I think they don't really know what they want to be when they grow up. I mean, they might be 50 years old, but they don't know what they want to do with their life. But then I see the job hoppers that are doing the same role for multiple companies. And I think they're just looking for a place where they belong. Switching jobs, looking for work is one of life's most stressful events. Most people don't willingly go look for work. They go look for work when the pain of change is less than the pain of staying the same.
Oh, love that. Say that
When
again.
people look for work, they're doing it because they need a new opportunity, something that's going to give them a sense of purpose, something that's going to give them fulfillment, something that's going to allow them to go home and not be mad at the family because they're pissed off at their boss, right? Yeah. So if somebody's doing the same role, so maybe they were a paralegal, right? And they did that for 4 or 5 different companies over a couple year period. I wouldn't say that that's a bad thing. I'd say they're looking for the right place to be. So that's how we coach on the job hopping piece.
I love that perspective. You are so right. And I love what they go home. You said, people tell me I'm looking for a home. And since the pandemic, they're really looking at their work-life balance. They're looking at where they spend a majority of their waking hours. And it wants to be something that's inspiring, impactful, somewhere where at the end of the day, they feel filled up versus depleted.
Absolutely. 89% of millennials will take a pay cut to go work for someone whose purpose and values align with their own.
89%. Wow.
That's 9 out of 10. Right? So, I mean, if you think about that, if you can just be really clear about the type of culture and you can sell that, if you will, as the employer, you're going to start attracting the type of people that are going to fit and belong inside of your company.
That's amazing.
And none of that comes through on the resume.
No, it doesn't. So talk to us before we started recording. One other thing that I'd like about the kind of the past performance. One, we're talking about on the employee side of things, right? But as a business owner, what have you, they have their war stories of people that didn't work out. There's a saying that, they always say business would be great, but for the employees. And I know you and I kind of had a conversation about internal, like where you feel like a lot of times I think, and you mentioned this when we were talking earlier, that they hire a recruiter because people say, managers will say, oh, I suck at hiring. I'm terrible at hiring or what have you. Or they hire a recruiter because of all the pain that they have from the past. But talk to us a little bit about your tagline in your business, in addition to your perspective around why, I think it's a good exercise of why you don't need a recruiter, and it causes you to look at your past performance internally as a company around your process and things of that nature. What's your take on that?
One of the hardest things to do as leaders or owners is to take a look in the mirror and say, I might be the problem. And there is so much that goes into the recruiting process in creating a relationship with the candidate that I think too many people are so reactive. Like I hire when I need to. Somebody just left, a position just opened, I just took off on a new client. Now I'm going to hire now. And when you get desperate like that, it's really easy to hire the person that's not going to fit. And then 6 months later, it doesn't work out. Well, who made the decision to make that person an offer? Like who made the decision to onboard that person the way you onboarded them? It wasn't the employee's decision to not get onboarded. Like, I don't know how that happens in the legal space.
It happens the same way.
So, I mean, I tell this story and it's a joke, but Jimmy shows up for work on his first day and you're like, oh, Jimmy, we're so excited you're here. But we weren't so excited to get IT to get all your logins set up. So we need you to kind of hang out for a little bit because you can't log in yet. And then, oh, HR hasn't finished your background check. So just so you know, this is still conditional. And it's like, wait a minute, I thought you were excited. And this is the story we tell. And then we're like, oh, see that desk over there? All those boxes. Yeah, it kind of looks like a crazy tower, like kids were building. We knew you were coming. So we just stopped doing that work because we knew you could catch up for us. And then it's like, go sit over in your desk. Don't let the boxes fall on you because you don't have insurance for 90 days. It's like, I thought we were excited. What happened? And that's how onboarding works. And then 6 months later, we're mad because this person never fully engaged. Well, maybe if we took a look in the mirror, who didn't fully engage? I thought you were excited.
Yeah. You know what? Oh my goodness. I will get calls all the time. I need someone fully experienced, blah, blah, blah. And it's followed 110% of the time with this statement. I don't have time to train. I'm like, you mean you don't have time to invest in the relationship with the new person? Like, translation to a new human beings want time, attention, feedback. So translation of I don't have time to train is that exact scenario that you just made. And then they'll call me and they're like, you sent me garbage. I'm like, oh my God. Right?
Yeah. It's so crazy to me. And, you know, a lot of the work that I do is around that mindset and change management and just thinking differently. It's called the employee-employer relationship for a reason. It's a relationship. A lot of these people are going to see their teammates more than they're going to see their family. And if they don't have a sense of belonging, if they don't think people care about them, they're not going to be engaged. And they're going to get uncomfortable. And the second someone taps them on the shoulder and says, hey, I have an opportunity for you here, they're going to take it.
Yeah. So help me out with this one, because this is exactly, you're right. When somebody taps them on the shoulder, which is, i.e. you and I, recruiters, and they're sharks. Let me tell you, if you have somebody that you're employing and they're good, recruiters are going to be banging on their door. And I always tell people this. My favorite is when I send them out messages to LinkedIn and people reply and say, nope, I'm happy. And they won't even look at my opportunity. I'll go seek out that business and go to their website and send them a message and say, whatever you're doing, 10 exit, because your people won't even talk to me as a recruiter. So kudos to you. But, you know, then there's other people where I just got an email this morning from a law firm. They don't want to pay people anything. You pay people peanuts, you're going to attract monkeys. Yeah. So they won't pay people. I sent them so many candidates. Now they're too expensive because I'm not paying them that much because I have to train them, blah, 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 blah. So then I just get an email from them this morning. Hey, we just had 2 paralegals quit over the weekend. Can you help us find a paralegal? My response was, hell no, because you won't pay your people. So guess what? The rest of the people you have in the building, they're leaving shortly too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's toxicity over there. So, well, and that's the thing. They got to look at what's causing this.
Yes. Yeah. And it's not always. So I think in my experience, to your point, millennials will take a pay cut. I've hired people in their 40, 50, 60s and plus that have taken $10, $20, $30,000 paychecks because of the environment. But when you treat your people well, I mean, it's no different than a marriage. I have no idea what happened, you know, like, why did it crumble? You dissect it. You're like, no time, attention, feedback, any of that. You have to invest in that, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you invest in your employees and you let them know that you truly care, like if you can't pay your mortgage, if the employee can't pay their mortgage because you don't want to pay them, what are you saying about how much you value them or their family or their goals in life? You know, there was a study done a few years ago by a consulting firm who works specifically with large enterprises around recruiting millennials. You know, you hear this, we've all got a millennial joke, right? But you hear the stories about millennials. They want to make a difference. They want to have a sense of purpose. They want to be a change agent in the world. Like, this is what they want. And they did this study and they went to these millennials inside of this enterprise and they said, what are your personal goals? You know, someone will be like, oh, I want to start a nonprofit digging wells in Africa. Like, I want to do these things. And the employers were like, I cannot help them with this stuff, because what are they going to do? They're going to go run off and they're going to do their nonprofit. And I've invested in them. 5 years later, they came back And those employees, even though they started their nonprofit, even though they did these things, were more engaged, more productive, more profitable for the organization. And they weren't going anywhere because no one else was going to invest in them this way.
Wow.
And they just wanted someone to invest in them.
I hear that so often because they are heart-centered, that generation, if we're going to pick on them. And people will say that exact thing. And I'm like, but then I'll send them the next candidate and they're like, they have absolutely no compassion, no empathy, no drive. It's like, it's such a double-edged sword. Do you find that where people they can ask one person a question and they will hang? And that happened to me this morning. They said, I don't know if I wanted to make them an offer, but then I asked them this question about, give me an example of a time where you had to overextend your follow through a project management position. And the way that the candidate answered it, like they just shut down. They're like, I didn't like the way that they answered that. So I'm not hiring them because they don't have an appreciation for systems and process.
Yes, I'd look at that and I go, that's an interesting way to answer that. Help me understand why you did it that way or why that happened. Like, help me understand that. Again, it's a relationship. You know, I use a lot of marriage analogies in what I do, but you don't move in with someone right after getting married and divorce them because they don't put the cap on the toothpaste, right? That's one of the things, but okay, that's interesting. You don't put the cap back on the toothpaste. Let's talk about that for a second. Oh, you didn't put the toilet seat down. Let's talk about that for a second. It's the same thing here. I mean, how often are they going to be forced to overextend their follow through?
Oh, I love that because they get these canned interview questions off of the internet and they have their 47 questions and they want to get through all their questions because so-and-so said, this is the way that use my questions. I find great people because of this, question. Yeah. But they're not having a conversation. So often I'm like, well, did you ask them about that? They're like, well, no, it wasn't on the script, or, they're so rigid with the interviewing process, or I didn't know if I should ask that question. I didn't want to offend them, or I didn't know if it's appropriate. I'm like, if you don't feel like you can have a courageous, crucial, honest, engaging conversation in the interviewing process, this is why you have a line of turnstile of employees leaving, because you won't have the courageous conversations or just treat it like a conversation the same way you would if you're out at happy hour.
Yeah. It's interesting the way that you talked about that, because remember, switching jobs is a stressful event for many people. They have no idea if the grass is greener, if it's going to be better, if they're going to follow through. And the people that are really good interviewers, they do it too much. The professional interviewers are the ones that knock it out of the park in the interview. And then when they start working for you, you're like, wait a minute, this isn't the person I interviewed. I get that a lot of our clients do phone screens. And they're like, oh, they're going to be horrible. I'm like, you had 10 minutes with them on the phone in one of life's most stressful times. Cut them a break. Like the fact that they showed up for the interview should be enough. Right. Yeah. But they don't think about it that way. They're like, oh, they didn't perform well in the interviews. There's no way they're going to perform well. Like the ones that are going to perform well in the interview are the ones that interview too frequently. Yes. So they're going to be gone soon.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. So talk to us a little bit about your concept of hire better people faster, because as we both know, it's an employee's market. It's tight. It's tough. And I love this, your whole concept around this. Share this with our listeners too.
Yeah, so it's really the focus is on better. So what we do is what I see happen is we tend to overcorrect. Right? We're very reactive in our hiring. And the first person that looks good, we hire them. And we go through 5, 6, 7, 8 of these bad actors. And then we're like, well, there's no one good out there. There's no one good out there. But if our emphasis was on hiring the better people, the ones that are going to fit our culture, the ones that are going to have a sense of belonging, the ones that we knew we could engage and motivate, if we focused on the better, we would hire them so much faster and we would have to hire less. Which is the other thing. So much of the recruiting issues right now are not because all these companies are doubling in size. It's because their turnover is triple digits. and they're backfilling positions. They're like, I can't find anybody. Well, how many people have you hired? 27 people, and you couldn't find one. Like, we really need to focus on the better. So we very much teach hire slow, fire quick, which is another issue. Like, too often, oh, I should fire that person, but I need the extra hands. Oh, I need to get rid of that person, but they need to be here because who's going to do the work? Well, they're already poorly performing. Get rid of them. Free them up to go find a place where they can fit, right? And make the decision to move on. So it's that revolving door is just, it's hurting people. The retention issue.
It's hurting people. It's hurting your business. It's hurting your bottom line. So if you're experiencing this, I would say stop, drop, and roll right now and take a hard look at your hiring and onboarding. And I hate to even, because your onboarding is part of your hiring process. And so often people are like checking boxes. And once they get someone there, then they're like, whew, okay, now I can go focus on higher value.
We coach the entire employee experience. So onboarding starts when that person first finds out you have an opportunity to apply. Because how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if you're late to respond to somebody, if you're like, oh, I got these applicants in here, I'm too busy right now, I'll get to it in a week. I guarantee you that's how you're going to interview them. Oh, we can't interview next week, I'm too busy, I'll interview the week after. You make them an offer. Oh, I got to get that offer out. I'm a week behind on getting the offer out. They onboard. Oh, we're a week behind on getting you onboarded. We'll train you later. Just get to work. Like, and that's what happens. So onboarding starts before somebody even applies. Like, the first time they see your website, they see your job post, they see your social media, you're onboarding. Like, you're on. And so if you're not delivering an amazing employee experience from that moment on, you're going to get to the onboarding part and the engagement part and the retention part, and it's not going to work.
What are some tips you have for our listeners on how to kind of do an analysis or quality control exercise? Do you have anything fun they could do as a business right now, while you're not in the thick of hiring from a place of pain and hiring from a place of urgency? Because you and I both know when people start to really get serious about hiring, they should have done it 6 months ago. Absolutely. They should have done it before, way
too late.
Yeah.
Way too late.
Do you have anything for us?
So one of the things that I like to do is I like to use the concept of cloning your best employees. So there are people that are on your team that are top performers. You like working with them. They like working with you. They're the ones that reject you when you reach out to them, right? And say, hey, I got an opportunity. They're like, no, I'm happy. Grab them and sit them down and say, hey, I got a couple of questions for you. The first one is, talk to me about why you like it here. And then make sure that that information is in your job ad. If you know, I'm big on behavioral analysis, pre-hire assessments. I'm sure you are as well.
Yeah.
But if you've got some behavioral assessments that you can take, give them to those employees that you want to clone, and take that information and get it in your job ad. Then take that job ad and give it to that employee and say, would you apply for this? Knowing what you know about our company, would you apply for this job? It's amazing the feedback you'll get.
Now, okay, keep going. I have a question about that, but
yeah. So once they give you the feedback, now you can take that, and now you've got an ad that is going to be attractive to someone who's very similar to the type of person that already fits your organization.
And would you recommend that this rockstar employee that we want to clone actually handle the initial interviewing process?
I would have them as part of the process when we get to culture fit, but I wouldn't have them as the initial part, unless their role is, unless they're a hiring manager, and that'd be different, right? Because you have to remember, just like the plumber isn't good at proofreading his resume, this person may not be very good at interviewing. It might not be a skill set that they have.
Good point.
So in my book, which I will offer to everybody as a free download at the end, we talk about some of these different processes you can create in the interview. And one of them we talk about is the walk around. So once you get to a certain stage in the interview process, typically happens that let's introduce you to the team. I want to, just to get a sense. Are there going to be any engagement? Are they going to get along? But what you do is you take one of your employees, this one, and you leave them and you say, hey, we're going to be walking around Jimmy later. So I'm going to leave Jimmy and I'm going to walk away. And I want you to just have a really open, honest, candid conversation with Jimmy. Because at the end, later today, I'm going to ask you what you think of it. And you can give them a couple of questions to ask. You can say, hey, I'd love for you to make some comments about the work, let them know from your perspective how it feels, and see where the conversation goes. And it's amazing because we've done this in the past, and somebody that the owner is super excited about will all of a sudden let loose and just start trash talking their former boss. And they're like, wait a minute, if you're talking about them that way, what's going to happen when it doesn't work out here? You're going to talk about us that way. Right? So you can people get comfortable. They're just different. Right? When the boss isn't in the room, right? The cat's away here, right? So that's one of that walk around process. We actually set it up as part of the interview process to introduce them and have that conversation.
I love that. And, just the honesty and the vulnerability of all that. Talk to us a little bit, because I could think of a couple of scenarios where, all right, the employee comes back, right? So you're asking the employee these conversations. Obviously, you'd have to really have a safe environment where their truth and their voice and their input is. But when they come back with this, and I don't know about you, but a lot of times entrepreneurs will go on the defense, right?
Sure.
And so what advice do you have for the hiring managers, business owners, whatever role you sit in for this, about not being defensive and or throwing stuff back in people's face?
Well, I would suggest that they take a look at their current results. And if they don't like the results they're getting, maybe they need to think about a different way of doing it. Because the thing I always hear is there's just no good people. We have clients that are hiring good people all the time. They're out there. There's no good people in your mind. So maybe it's time to think differently about what a good person is. Or maybe it's time to think differently about how you're going to interview or qualify that person. And really, it's changing that mindset. So my question would be, if I were that employee, it's like, do you want someone who's going to work out? Or do you want someone who you like?
Oh.
Right. That would be my question to them.
And as you were talking, I think another cool little exercise for our listeners would be maybe grab out an old school pen and paper and write down what you believe, your definition of a good employee, your definition of this ideal candidate, from a place of the human side, mindset side, the work ethic side, the result side versus the credentials and things of that nature, and get really, really clear on what that looks like. Because part of me sitting here thinking, is it that there's no such thing as a good employee, or is it really there's no such thing as good enough for you?
Yeah. We have a process we call the core fit profile, which is exactly that. It looks at 9 different areas for a particular role in how do they align to your vision of your company? Like, how are they going to help you get where you need to go? How are they align with the purpose? Like, why are you in business? Why do they care? How do they align with your core values? How do they align with your team? What does success look like for someone in this role? We put in the pre-hire assessments and the job models, anything else that we might create from a scientific perspective, and say, okay, this is in here as well. What kind of job ad is going to appeal to this person? What kind of interview questions are going to help you with it? It's all in the core fit profiles. It's almost like a guide for how to hire someone for this role. But most of it has nothing to do with, can they do the skills? Do they have the skills? Because you said it earlier, like most people are like, oh, I don't have time to train them. Everybody gets training in a new job. It might not be a structured training, it might not be good training, but they're going to train them. You're going to train them how to use your CRM, or how to use your software, or how to order supplies at your office, or how you want them to talk to customers. You're going to teach them something. So let's start interviewing and qualifying people for the things that we can't or won't teach.
That is so rich. So rich. I love that because they are getting training. It's just, are they getting good training?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I love your core fit profile. How can our listeners learn more about that?
So we're actually in the middle of redoing our website, but I do have a gift for everybody that's on here. They can go to our website and they can download a free copy of my book, How to Hire the Ones You Won't Want to Fire. It's all about the interview process. And how do you get people to take their mask off? Remember, there's those professional interviewers that tell you everything you want to hear. And then there's those ones you're like, I'm not quite sure because they're not telling me the right things. Both of those people are hiding behind a mask because they're afraid to be vulnerable. They're concerned about what should I say? What shouldn't I say? Like, this job is really important to me. How do you get them to take their mask off and just be their authentic self? And that's the premise of the book. And then what we do is we give a whole bunch of tips inside their interview processes, interview questions, different ways to think about the interviews. And then we have a whole bunch of extra guides they can download after they have the book. 22 questions you won't find on Google. Like, we have a whole bunch of resources that will be a lot of fun for them. And whether they use those questions or not, the point was to get them to think differently about how they solve the problem.
And what's your website?
thecorematters.com.
Okay. We'll have us in the show notes, people, but a lot of times people are exercising, commuting, what have you.
Most of our listeners are in the car, so I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But we'll have it in the show notes. And if you can always go to hiringandempowering.com, go on the podcast and pick it out as well. It'll be posted there for your ease. Okay. So you just said something that really intrigued. Oh, my gosh, I lost my question. It was so good. I didn't want to interrupt you about the interview process in regards to your assessment and having people go through that. Oh man, I just lost it. I don't know. It'll come back to me when we keep talking.
Well, maybe we'll just have to do another show sometime and dig into that once you remember. But our focus is really on the process. I think too many people, they recruit because they have to. They wing it. They understand that it's something they have to do, but it's not something they really want to put a lot of effort into because that's not their expertise, right? If you're a law firm, recruiting is not something that makes you a lot of money. It's not something that really people are going to invest a lot of time and effort into. They're going to invest in their expertise. And I think that if companies would start thinking more about our first effort is to market ourselves so that we attract the right people to us, they'll take care of establishing our expertise. They'll take care of creating credibility with our customers. They'll take care of so much more of your business than you could even imagine. If our effort was really on how do we attract the right people to our team, join our team so that we can achieve the goals we've set out. It would revolutionize companies.
And it does. And you just brought me back. You said, I got my question now. It's about attraction, right? This is sales. It's about enrolling. It's about empowering. It is about getting the right fit and the right culture. And you brought me back to that in regards to, how to attract solutions-based people that, come with the right mindset. And it made me think about, this was my question. Tell me what you think about this. Going back to the plumber with the typos in the resume. And so often, I don't know if you experience this, people will call me and say, my friend down the street or whatever found the most amazing person who's just cranking out money and results in the firm, and they're only paying them $11 an hour or what have you. And I'm up and I'll tell them, well, this position's probably going to cost you about $30 an hour. I'm not paying that because blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, really? Why don't you give me your colleague's name? I'm going to interview them and find out how they found this $11 an hour person. And to your point, I'm like, all right, tell me a little bit about this person. They're like, oh, they don't have a college degree. No. Tell me about their resume. Oh, good God, no, she's not. No, it's terrible. Like, that's not her strong suit. Her whole job is to do blah, 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 marketing,
Yeah.
communicating, outreach, go out and go networking and do whatever. I don't really care if she knows how to justify a letter. Like, that's not, and you can't compare apples. To your point, if you're going to nitpick resumes, if you're going to make your decision based on experience, credentials, all the other crap that we've been told, well, guess what? Your competition will gladly, because they have a process that is about hiring human beings, not human doings. And
Yeah.
so I would, when I line up their processes side by side in their mindset about hiring good human beings, I come back to them. I'm like, yeah, because your unrelenting expectations are why you cannot find, attract, and keep people. And that's why you can't grow your business and everybody delegates back up to you.
So one of the things that this might relate to your audience. So I never understood being an entrepreneur, how much legal there was involved, like just to do it right. My attorney has done a very good job of convincing me it's cheaper to stay out of trouble than it is to get out of trouble.
Yeah.
But the attorney that I have now is by far the most expensive attorney I've ever worked with. I mean, he's, in my world, this is a lot, but he's approaching $500 an hour. I think it's a lot. The first attorney I ever worked with, I think, was like 175, 200.
Yeah.
The attorney I have today is by far the most valuable asset in my business from a legal perspective. He has created more value for me at $500 an hour than any of those guys at 175 or 200 could have ever created. I've had him create documents that for a third of the cost that those cheaper guys would have created, because it's going to take them 10 hours. It takes him 2.
Yes.
And I know that your audience understands that from a pricing perspective in their business.
Yes.
And they probably all would agree you get what you pay for.
Yes.
When it comes to hiring legal services, right? I'm not the
100%.
cheapest. You get what you pay for. Like,
Mhm.
if you want to go down the street, maybe that guy's going to go bankrupt and he might not be around to help you in 6 months because he's not charging enough.
Right.
You need to think about that when it comes to your people as well. You get what you pay for. That person might be $11 an hour and they might be clocking 50 hours a week of overtime just to keep up. How long is that going to work? You have no idea what their situation really is. You get what you pay for. So when it comes to paying your people, you pay them for the value they're giving you and your organization. And if you only need $20 an hour worth of value, then go pay them $10. But I can promise you that $30 an hour person that you're pitching, Molly, I promise you that person's creating hundreds of dollars an hour worth of value for the firm versus that person that's 11. Like, think of it like a pricing problem. Think of it how you think of pricing in your business.
Say more about that real quick.
Well, it's just back to what I went. You know, so many people, one of the top 10 reasons small businesses go under is because they don't charge enough. They think, well, the only way I'm going to get it is if I can actually sell them at a lower price point. But then you don't have the resources, you don't have the team, you don't have the processes or the systems to really deliver because you're not charging enough. So a lot of times we raise our prices and then we find that point where people no longer want to pay. And then that's our price for a while. And when we start thinking about pricing strategy, we think about how do we compete on price in the market? Well, employees are doing the exact same thing. How do I compete on price? The only difference is it's instead of them paying you an hourly wage, an hourly fee, you're paying them an hourly wage. So as long as they're valuable, they're productive, they're generating the results you're paying them for, take care of your people. They don't get up out of bed every single morning, leave their families and come to work for you because they want to make you rich. That's not why they do it. They get out of bed every single morning, come to work for you because they want to take care of that family back home. Help them take care of that family.
Absolutely.
And it goes so much more than just wages. There's so many other things, but it always drives me nuts when people want to pay bottom of the market and then they're mad because they're getting bottom feeders.
Absolutely. It is, it's so true. Or, I'm not going to pay that. Well, that's what fair market value, that's what it is right now. And then they'll say, no, I'm just going to wait around while they're the file. They can't get work done. They can't get production done, what have you. And the cost of it, you're paying someone 150 grand a year. I always have to constantly convince my clients, you are not writing them $150,000 check on day one.
Yeah.
You have to break it down. I've had attorneys that have said no to rock star candidates that could have started taking down decreasing their stress by 50%. Because the measuring stick is always money first, which I think it should be your energy first.
Yeah.
Because if you are just so stressed to the gills and you are showing up in a client meeting and you're not closing the deal, it's because of the energy you're bringing to the table. It's a relationship, as you are talk about, Ryan. And I'm like, okay, so the variance, the delta here, like the difference here is, so it's $93 a day difference. If you want me to find you someone for, 120 and they want 150, you do the math. I can't remember. It's 93 and some change a day. Really? When you're billing them out, even if they're a junior attorney at 175, 275 an hour, that's a good business decision.
Yeah.
So
I
I
have a client I've worked with for a few years now, and I remember when he first started telling people he was working with me, he's like, oh, he's expensive. I hope I get my return. I hope I get my return. And so his goal was to exit the company in 5 to 7 years. That was what he wanted. And the only way he could do that is if he had the right people on his team. And when we started working together, he needed to hire 50 people.
Ooh.
He had this huge project that he bid, he won. He's like, I need 50 people. Like, I don't know how to get them. We got him 50 people in 90 days. Which he never thought would be possible. Then we started talking about, okay, what's the leadership team look like? How are we really taking stuff off of your plate? He was working 80 hours plus a week. He couldn't remember the last time he had a weekend off. He was just nonstop, and it wasn't there for his wife. And it was causing family issues with his son, with his daughter, with his wife. We started working together, and our real focus was, how do we get you out of this mess? And he even tells me today, he goes, I spend more money on people now than I ever have before, but I can't remember the last time I worked a weekend.
Oh.
I can't remember the last time I worked a Friday afternoon. He says, in fact, last Wednesday, I took Wednesday off just last minute to go fishing. Like, he's afforded himself this lifestyle now because he invested in people that he can trust.
Yeah.
So if your goal is to work 80, 90, 100 hours a week, die at your desk, keep doing what you're doing. But if that's not what your goal is with your business, then it's time to rethink some things.
Yeah, I love that story because people keep telling me all I want is freedom. I just don't want to owe the file. I don't want to be chained to my desk, what have you. Well, you got to pay to play, number one, but also, well, yeah, every other Friday when he's looking at the payroll and the money that's going out for all these 50 plus people, it stings a tiny bit. But I guarantee the following Wednesday, when he's sitting on the river with a fishing pole and a beer, he's like, damn, that's the best money I ever spent because my phone's not blowing up, my email's not blowing up, and I have full faith and confidence that my team has my back.
Yeah. And for him, it really was about trust. And I'm sure for a lot of the listeners out there, it's about trust. I can't find people I can trust. Like, people will tell me all the time, I can't find good people. What they're really saying is, I can't find people that I trust that will take care of the business the way I would take care of the business.
So talk to me real quick. We could go forever, but we'll end with this because I think you just hit the nail on the head with that one. Talk to us a little bit about, if you're just, drive-by coaching on, how do you find people that you can trust? What's some juice to get started on that?
Well, the first step is to become trustworthy yourself.
Yes, I love it.
That's step number one. So I told you in my book, we talk about authenticity.
Yeah.
There's no reason you should ask them to be authentic if you're not going to be authentic yourself. You got to be authentic first. You have to be trustworthy first. So if you're treating people like garbage, if you're If you're not following through on your commitments, if you're promising people raises and promotions and not giving them, you shouldn't be surprised when people don't trust you.
Or show up and perform, or, show up like
Yeah.
a good employee, right?
Yeah. And so they're not going to show up, and they're never going to do what's needed to get you to trust them. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is you got to hire for people that want to be there, not people that just want a job. You need to hire people that want to join your team.
Wow.
That want to be attached to your company name, that are proud to say, that's where I work. And that has nothing to do with their skill set.
Yeah. I love it. You just said that. So often I will tell people, when you start to hear your employees say, our clients, when you start to hear your employees say we, when you start to hear your employees feel like viscerally sick because we got fired by a client, because we missed a deadline, because we what have you, and you see your employees like really hounding you to meet your deadlines, to show up for what have you, bugging you. I tell people, when you have a team of professional nags and professional babysitters that are constantly like, we need that to close the deal, to what have you. I think that's when you no longer get to say, you have arrived, and that is your permission slip to stop being a micromanager and to let go and trust.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that we see over and over again, the biggest bottleneck in any business is the owner that is actively involved in the business. They are the biggest bottleneck. And we have clients that have done this, where they've actually had scorecards around how often the owner came into the service department. And the goal was 0 per week. And if the owner came in once, at the end of the week, they say, okay, why was he here? How can we make sure that he doesn't come here again? Because every time the owner walked in the room, productivity ceased. It was done because he wanted to change something or do something different, or he had a complaint about something. And it was really hard for him to trust his people, because he would never get out of their way long enough to let them go, either learn from their mistakes or show him that they could be trusted.
And listen, listeners, walking into the room and going into the plant, sending baloney emails, that equates to the same thing. If you don't have a physical warehouse or a service department or what have you, just checking, hey, did you blah, blah, blah. That is the same as walking into the service floor, walking into the warehouse. If you're in their email box, you're in their text box, you're on their phone, you're walking into their office, it equates to the same. And I know so often for firms that I serve as a fractional CEO, I'll hear this. Okay, we're going through the calendar, everything. Oh my gosh, the attorney's going on vacation for 2 weeks. This next statement out of every employee's, I can't wait, because then we can get stuff done.
I've heard that so many times.
If you hear your employees saying that, sometimes I'll tell my clients when they're just at that tipping point, Mike, you're going on sabbatical for 30 days. Like out of the office. You can show up for client meetings, networking, whatever you have to do, but no communication with the client, with the employees at all. Employees like, we got this.
Yeah. And that's a big part of being able to trust your employees. You have to let them go do the work without you. You have to let them prove that they can do it. And too often we're too afraid to do that. If we give them too much rope, they might hang themselves, or they might build you a bridge. You have no idea what's going to happen. Let them, and people need to learn from their mistakes. I got little kids at home, and my son is now learning how to climb on things. And it's one of those things like, oh, we don't want to let him get hurt. We don't want him to get hurt. Well, he kind of needs to understand how gravity works. Because if he doesn't understand how gravity works and that it might hurt, he's never going to learn. And I don't yell at him for getting hurt. I don't yell at him for falling down because he's still a little clumsy when he's running. But we do that all the time to our employees. We have them show up. They walk into the corner. They're like, I don't know what to do with this box. And we're like, see, we knew we hired a bad one. It's like, what? So yeah, there's so much mindset that goes into this. There's so much that goes into just being able to create a relationship with your team. And that starts happening in the interview process. It's like the first date, right? That's how you get to know each other.
Yeah.
And no one ever gets married after a 15-minute date. Stop hiring people after a 15-minute interview. Stop it.
Or putting them through like a 9-month process where you're not making decisions either.
Oh, yeah. Being indecisive is the worst.
Yes.
And then they're mad. Oh, I lost another good one. Well, you took too long. I think it's something like 80%, somewhere around there, of candidates drop out of the process because it takes too long.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Time kills all deals.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So move quick on them.
All right. We're going to have you back, Ryan. I could talk to you forever. Jeepers creepers. We need some beers for this conversation.
We could talk about it for a long time. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, this is so fun. So again, thecorematters.com. I'm going to put this in the show links. I'm going to put your LinkedIn. You have a phenomenal LinkedIn profile. I'll put all the juicy links in the show notes, and then let people know the name of your book again.
How to Hire the Ones You Won't Want to Fire.
Oh, so
and if
good.
they want the hard copy, you can get it on Amazon. So if they did want one.
Yeah, I would highly recommend, because attorneys like to highlight and write. And I love that about them. Get their sticky notes and use it as a reference manual.
Absolutely.
One and done.
Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right. That's a good stopping point. Ryan, thank you so much for all of your wisdom today.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Okay. Until next time.